Ladies and gentlemen, if a group of elephants would start to work from home, what would happen? It sounds like a crazy question, but it's maybe not as strange as it appears at the first instance. Coronaviruses are very common among animals, and if in a group of animals there is a coronavirus, the system that is supposed to protect you, which is the group, is actually attacking you. So, like a human being can suffer from an autoimmune disease where the system that wants to protect you is actually attacking you. If that is the case, then what happens? I asked myself this question in 2020 when the lockdown started, and I wanted to understand the impact of Corona on us in the workplace. My name is Kilian Wawoe. I'm an organizational psychologist, used to work in banking, where I did a lot of research on reward, did my PhD on the subject of performance management and reward. And now I work as an academic at the University Amsterdam and as a practitioner, helping organizations with reward issues and hybrid working. And in March 2020, I asked myself this question that I also would like to ask to you. What if a group of elephants is suffering from a coronavirus and they say, okay, let's become hybrid. And they say 4 days a week, we will go our own ways, and then 3 days a week we will be together. What will happen? Now, most likely, that's what I did. I asked a biologist to give me an answer to the question, and they said to me, well, most likely the mother elephant the leader will probably lack control. Okay. But if you look further in the herd, the senior elephants, there will be a very diverse image of whether or not they liked working from home or be in a hybrid herd, so to say. Maybe a few of them will very much like it because you're much more agile, and others say, well, it's a bit inconvenient because I feel lonely. But the most important lesson from what elephants or what animals do with the coronavirus is that if you ask the question to the young elephant after a couple of weeks working from home or being in a hybrid group, if you ask a young elephant, how are you doing after a few weeks, most likely there is no answer because the young elephant is dead. Groups are a survival mechanism, and they're there to survive for the whole group. Yeah, it's a survival mechanism for the group and not so much for the well-being of the individual. Now, if we're going to talk about hybrid working, the question is not so much what do you want or how can I help you to make your hybrid working experience or hybrid working journey a pleasant one. No, the question is how do I make sure that the ones who suffered most or who need the group most actually benefit. And I did a lot of research myself during the lockdown in various countries with surveys and with interviews, trying to understand the issue of hybrid working. And I can already tell you that it is a very diverse issue, and people have very diverse answers to the question, did you like to work from home? However, I think the question is wrong. And especially, we're going to talk about the reward and performance management element to it. And I think the conception that many organizations currently have about hybrid working is fundamentally wrong, because what is the fundament of us in the workplace is that we are together, not for ourselves, but for the other. Yeah, I think that in the lockdown, we reinvented the collective. And that's where I will end in 25 minutes time, explaining to you that I think that a hybrid organization is not about what you want as an individual, but it's about making sure the collective works. And I will show you how I came to that point. Okay, let me first start by a few things that are very important in groups in general. And what I would like to tell you is what is the thing that makes people tick most in the workplace. Yeah, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the things that make people tick in the workplace, and we're going to do a poll question. Now, before I go on, you need my help on this because I will show you in a bit where to find this. But first of all, I will show you the poll question. And that is the following. Now, I would like to know from you what motivates people most in the workplace. And I will tell you later on why I asked this question and why it is so important in terms of hybrid working. But let's do the poll question first. Okay, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think makes people tick most in the workplace? Is that A, financial incentives? Is that B, interpersonal support? Is that C, acknowledgement for good work? Is that D, making progress? Or is that E, clear goals? And I would like to ask you, in the live chat, you see another bullet which says poll. So go a little bit, not to the live chat, but a little bit to the right, and then you will see the poll. And then please be so kind to show which one you think makes the most sense. Okay, so which one do you think? And then you click the send button, and then please let me know, what do you think is the answer that motivates people most? Good. Now, while you hear my silence, I am looking at which one scores best. I'll give you a little bit more time. Okay. I think that by now the distribution is more or less clear. We have a clear winner, and that's C. But let me share with you 3 observations. So how this research is done is that this is done through diary studies. Yeah, so you ask your people, just fill in a diary, let them know what you're doing during the working day and how you feel. Okay, it turns out that not many of you had A. So not many of you think that financial incentives are a good way to incentivize your people. Okay, so and that's correct. Although we are here talking about reward for 2 days, I think one of the main lessons about reward, I think it's a hygiene factor. It should be enough. You have to pay people enough according to the market. You have to pay them enough versus each other. So not that women make less than men for the same work. It has to be fair compared to the profit or the outside world. But that's about it. It's a hygiene factor. Just make sure it is okay, and don't expect too much from it. And definitely don't expect your people to become super motivated if they're not. Okay, observation number 1. Rightly so, incentives are overestimated when it comes to motivation. The second observation is that if you ask manager what is the number 1, they say it is acknowledgement for good work. Like you said, the majority of you, 2/3, said acknowledgement for good work is the most motivating factor in the workplace. It's not a strange answer, but it's not the correct answer. And according to the progress principle of Teresa Amabile, the most motivating factor during work is actually making progress in meaningful work. In other words, you have the idea that you're doing something that makes sense and that you're going towards that goal. Yeah, so you're getting closer to your goal of doing something that makes sense. Okay, this idea of making progress is not new. It's actually already 50 years old, but it's the most interesting finding of Teresa Amabile and colleagues is that most likely making progress is the number 1. So if I had to make a constitution of work, yeah, so if I had to make, let's say, if I had to show you what the main things are about working, I would say the number 1 thing is growth. Making sure you're getting better and contributing to something bigger and growing in that. The second thing that turns out is super important is the feeling of being related to others. Yeah, so if you are related to others, the feeling of being part of something bigger is important. And the third one is autonomy, making sure that within the group you have a certain sense of self-direction. Now, if you look how, for instance, a family is constituted or a group of elephants, these are the elements that you will find back in the nature of human beings, that ultimately that we want to grow from each other, yeah, and being related to each other, and that within the group we also have a sense of autonomy. And for those of you who take care of children, you probably recognize that giving autonomy is also a function of giving growth. Yeah, so giving people room to do themselves, and the group itself is there to protect you, but not to solve all your problems. And I don't know if you're aware or familiar with the curling parents, these parents that want to keep away all the problems from their children. If you don't let children do things themselves, they don't learn. And the same applies for employees. They want to have self-direction within the team, always be connected. And to be philosophical for a moment, the moment that society is punishing you, these are the elements that we take away from you. Yeah, so we take away your growth or your meaningfulness, we take away the relatedness to the ones you love, and we take away your autonomy, and it's called prison. And I've been to prison many times of my life, fortunately only as a volunteer, and I can tell you the life that people had during those while being in jail is terrible, because you take away the basic thing that makes you a human, which is growth, meaningfulness, relatedness, and autonomy. Okay. Now, what we did during the lockdown is we wanted to understand how these factors were influenced during the lockdown. So in March 2020, we started to do research, and we asked people, what about your growth? What about your relatedness? And what about your autonomy? Now, what turns out in terms of growth, a lot of people said, I had the impression that, okay, my digital capacities grew, but in terms of growth, I didn't grow much during the lockdown. But who were the ones that suffered from this? The young elephants. Yeah, people who recently joined the herd, who recently joined the company, who recently started working, missed the opportunity to learn from each other. Yeah, so the growing opportunity, the ones that suffered most were the ones that recently joined. When it comes to relatedness, it turns out that the ones who already had a network didn't have any problems with being without a network for a while. Yeah, for instance, I didn't speak to the people in Teneo for 2 years. I didn't see them. And a few months ago, I was in Barcelona. We just picked things up like 2 years before. That is no problem. I don't need to see my friends, my family. I don't need to see my colleagues every time. The network is already there because I'm already for 25 years working on that. But if you're new and in a company, or my students, for instance, in their phase of their lives, not being related to others was super difficult. Last thing, a lot of people said during the lockdown, I have more autonomy. And that's and who liked that? The ones that knew what to do. Yeah, if you give a lot of autonomy to young elephants, here's the savannah, have fun. That's danger. But for people like me, it's actually quite pleasant. We also found during the lockdown is that this is a research from Google, and what you see here, the line that starts low and ends high, is existing networks. So what we saw during the lockdown is that people started to communicate more with the people that they already knew, and this has started to communicate less with the people they did not already know. Okay, so in terms of let's say the constitution of work, what did we see during the lockdown is that some people really liked to work from home, and some of did not like to work from home. So there's a huge difference between how people perceived working from home. When it comes to performance, so we also looked at, and there's a lot of research done in the last 2 years, are people more productive during the lockdown? It turned out that people made more hours, so there's more input in work, and that translated into more productivity for those who had individual jobs. Yeah, so if you're in a call center, if you have to take care of your own, if your own files, for instance, working alone, working in isolation is more productive. But the moment that you have to interact with others, it turns out that our productivity actually goes down. So we worked more hours also due to less commuting. So in some jobs, people were more productive, and in some parts of the job, people were not. Okay, then the last thing is well-being. Same thing. Some people were really happy with working from home, and other people were not. So, for instance, among my students, the number of students who had depressive thoughts used to be around 10%. It increased to 25%. Okay, so what do we know? We know that some categories of people like to work from home and others do not. Yeah, and the group that predominantly doesn't like to work from home is a lot of young elephants, so people who recently started working, people who recently joined the company, people who, for instance, were single, people with smaller homes, because working from home is more difficult if your Wi-Fi is not good and if you don't have a possibility to work from home. Okay. So far, I think a lot of things that I said maybe put into perspective something that you already knew. Some people like it, some people don't. And then it comes. So then organizations say, okay, let's go into hybrid working. And I always love these stock photos. Look at them. You know, there's one guy who really likes to work from home. So here he is. And look at the other people. They actually like to work from the office and they're super happy. And what do we do? And there we go. Back in time, let's reinvent performance management. We'll just give you a personal target, what you have to do. And if you want to deliver your target by working from home, fine. If you want to work from another country, also fine. And if you want to be in the office, great. Just do whatever you like. Flexibility, hybrid working, less office space, everybody happy. No. And I hope that this is the moment that everybody will stop chatting or emailing if you're doing something else, because this is the point I'm trying to make. I started my story by telling you that we human beings are group animals, and that the question is not so much if the individual likes to work from home. The question is, do we as a group survive? Yeah, in other words, what about the most vulnerable in our group? And if you say, well, for instance, if one is a teacher and the other person is a student, and you say, well, if you want to work from home, let everybody decide for themselves. You're basically say to the strongest, whatever you like, we're going to do. Whereas you should do the reverse. You should ask yourself the question, is there enough room to teach for those who need it? Okay, maybe a little bit more philosophical. I call this deliberately the constitution of work. And with that, I'm trying to say is that there's basic needs that are conflicting. So let's generalize a little bit. Let's say my generation, people like me with nice houses, with good Wi-Fi, with my own working space, with 25 years of experience, with my network and stuff. I like to have autonomy, but that's conflicting with my junior colleagues, my other colleagues at least, who'd like to be related and get knowledge. So we need to realize that there's fundamental needs at work, and that the needs of one group are conflicting with the other. So what I would like to tell you today is that at least my contribution to the discussion of hybrid working is that if you have to choose, let's say from the nature where we come from, relatedness and growth of those who need it is dominant over the autonomy of those who want to sit at home. And if you don't like that, become self-employed. Yeah, then be like this male elephant, you know, you're outside of the herd, you just come in for reproduction or for interaction purposes, you come in and you leave again. But the moment that you're part of the group, you have a responsibility for those who need you. Okay, what I would like to do is try to merge this or to reconcile these conflicting values. But I think in hybrid working, the mistake we're making is that we're making a system for the strongest, for people like me, and that we are making the system maybe for the average employee, because the average employee, at least in Europe, is about my age, is at the end of their 40s, but it's not about the average, it's about those who need the relatedness and the growth. Okay, let me try to reconcile both elements, and I've called this the corporate brain, because ultimately, if you have 1,000 people in an organization, that's 1,500 kilograms of brain. And this organization works in a certain way, has certain processes. And what I did is I asked people, but what is it that you need from your colleagues? And so if you go to the office, you don't go to the office to get information. Yeah, that's already 20 years gone. Information is online, everything. You don't go to the office to just talk to your colleagues, because since Zoom and Teams, we don't need that. And then I asked them, okay, but if we go to the office, then what is the purpose? And people came up with 3 different elements. Okay, first they said, if we go to the office, there needs to be moments of creation, of cooperation and coaching. In other words, there needs to be a moment of value and knowledge transfer. So the moments that you sit together in the old-fashioned way together, and that you can ask your colleagues questions. The second function that people indicated to want to do in the office is that they want to connect and collide. Yeah, so that if you are in the office, make sure that you connect and collide, that you meet people just for the sake of meeting them, to build your network or to maintain your network. And the last function that people saw for the office as in a collective function is coordination and communication. It turns out that some meetings are way better online. Knowledge transfer, you know, I'm giving you now everything that I know about my hybrid working. We not necessarily need to be in the same room for that. You can now be at the other end of the world, it's fine. But for some things, especially if we want to connect, or if we have difficult things to discuss, it's better to be in one room. And if we do that, let's do that in the office. Okay, and then I asked people, okay, but so in other words, there was this email from Elon Musk who said you need to be in the office at least 40 hours per week. I think that's completely wrong, because if you are in the office, you can live completely separate. Yeah, I also have a noise cancel. I actually have it here. I also have a noise canceling headset. Can you imagine that I'm sitting next to my colleague like this all day? You know, I'm basically saying, leave me alone. And actually, my colleague does that all the time, and I do that with him as well. And I go to a lot of offices where people are living apart together. So the point I'm trying to make is also in an intimate relationship, you don't ask yourself how many days per week should we see each other. It's rather, if we are together, what do we do? And the elements that you see here now are the elements that I'm referring to. Make sure that if you go to the office, that these are the things that you actually do. Okay, and then I asked myself, let's assume individual functions of the office apart. Let's assume that the office has collective functions. Then let's make sure that during the working week, these things are actually done. Yeah, so let's agree that on some specific moment during the working day or the working week, we're going to do the things that we think are important. For instance, let's reserve time to create and to coach and to cooperate. Let's reserve time to connect and collide. Let's reserve time to make sure that we have meetings that are actually common, and reserve, and that's an individual function, for people the opportunity to concentrate in the office. I've been helping organizations to transform into a hybrid organization for the last few months, last year, and there are a few strategic questions that I would like to give to you. So first of all, if you want to go into a hybrid organization, don't ask yourself, how many days are we going to the office? No, the question is, if you are in the office, what are you going to do? Yeah, so it's not decide for yourself. It's also not Elon Musk who says, come to the office. No, the question is, if we are there, what are we going to do? Like the group of elephants, it's okay not to be together as long as the young elephants are safe. Okay. So it's not about the average, it's not about the strongest, but it's actually about the weakest. Working from home, I think we should stop the word working from home. It's called remote working. You are being paid to be part of the company. So if you are remote, you still are part of the group. We should have discussions like, are you allowed to take care of children while working from home, and make sure that everything that you implement is temporarily. But the most important things, and I would like to touch upon these legal questions, is that as an employer, you are always responsible for your employees, whether it is legal or whether it's mental. Yeah, so if anything goes wrong, you're always on the hook. And that leads to a lot of questions regarding fiscality if people are working abroad, but still work from a distance. And my advice would be, in some cases, it's possible to work remote from another country. But if you really don't want to contribute to the rest of the herd, become self-employed. And I think we should be a little bit more strict on these things instead of saying to people, just do whatever you like. The same applies for compensation. And that, of course, is the topic I would like to end with, is when it comes to compensation. Yeah, if you give people money for being at home per day, I think that's a useless discussion. Yeah, give people, let's say, a certain amount of money for toilet paper and tea and coffee, but not give them a per day reward, because then you incentivize sitting at home. And the other thing is that this performance management old style, in which you just had a target and just make it happen, is an individual approach to work. And I think that's not something we should do. Okay, I think this is the ultimate opportunity to stop the traffic jam. And I think this is the ultimate chance also to decide with each other on how to communicate. Okay, let me wrap up by saying just a few last things, and then let's see if we have some moment for questions. Is the most important thing about working from home is that it's not about you, but it's about us. And don't ask yourself, how many days are we going to the office? No, I think we should ask ourselves, if we are in the office, what are we going to do? And don't fall in the pitfall of going back into time and having old-fashioned performance management and say, people, we just make you responsible for doing your stuff in a call center, yes, but not if you work as a group. Okay, let me see. There are a couple of questions. If we have a little bit of time, I wrote a white paper for those of you who are interested. I will definitely make sure you get it. But let me see a few questions. Frank has a question. Do you see hybrid working evolving in the next 10 years? Well, I think that we will definitely we will keep on working remotely. That's for sure. And this is the biggest chance in the history of HR to fundamentally rethink working. So that's the good news. On the other hand, I think that what we're lacking now is organizations that have the guts to say, this is what we expect you to do. Yeah, we pay you a lot of money, and this is what we ask in return. And I see now a lot of companies where people from my age do just whatever they like. They take dogs to the office. They have their yoga during the week, and they say, yeah, but this is my employee happiness. Yeah, but what about the young elephants? So evolution, yes. Big chance, absolutely, but I cannot say this enough. I'm really afraid that we're falling in the pitfall of not taking care of the, let's so to say, young elephants. Okay, then Olga has a question. When you look at work from everywhere, from everyone's point of view, somehow tax consequences are always outside of the picture. Companies tend to announce it with fancy slogans. Yeah, I totally agree. I think the mistake that we're making is that if you're more than, I think, 180 days in another country, you are fiscally in that country, but also legally. Yeah, so if I'm working in Spain, or living in Spain, working in the Netherlands, I'm under Spanish labor law and under Spanish tax law. So that's super complex. And also, what about my contribution to the rest of the team? Yeah, so in these cases, I often just say, become self-employed, and then you're not part of the group anyway, and then you can do whatever you like. Just one last tip that I got from a company the other day is, what you could do is say, okay, we give you 5 days a year, 10 days a year, 20 days a year, 100 days a year, no, not 100, where you can just work from wherever you want. Yeah, just as an incentive that you say, okay, 10 days a year, especially if you have family abroad or a second house, or you want to have a longer holiday, fine, you don't have to be secretive about it. Okay, you go to Barcelona, work there for a week, and while being connected to the Netherlands. However, if people fundamentally want to live in another country, you have to be cautious. Good. I am reminded that I only have 1 minute. Question by Vasily. What about blue collar workers? Yeah, I see a lot of organizations where there's friction because the blue collar workers are not able to work from home, whereas the white collar workers are, and that's leading to a lot of unhappiness. Good. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to finish my contribution, not by saying is that I wrote a white paper and a book, but the book is only in Dutch and in Ukrainian and Georgian. Yeah, long story why that is, but I'll spare you that. But if you need any further information, feel free to contact me. But my last statement that I would like to make is working from home. Don't ask yourself how many days should we come to the office, but rather tell your people what's expecting from them when they're in the office. Okay, that was my contribution, and I'm going to hand over now